Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Adult Child of Dysfunction. Today, we have with us a very, very special guest because it's somebody that I've been following her work and her podcast or her blog and everything for years and years and years. But today, we have with us Jody Lamb. She's a personal growth author dedicated to helping adult children of alcoholics heal from their past and create their dream lives. Her resilience and dedication stem from her own experiences of growing up with an alcoholic mother. Since 2009, Jody has been sharing the insights with a global community of adult children of alcoholics. Her middle grade novel, Easter and Peter's Operation Cool, received forward many reviews. I can't read, I don't have my glasses on. In the 2012 Book of the Year Award for its realistic portrayal of parental alcoholism. On her website, jodylamb.com, she offers simple strategies to overcome the challenges of being an adult child of an alcoholic and live a peaceful, fulfilling life. I'm just excited to have her here because literally she was one of the very first people to come online and start talking about this life that so many of us have lived and so many of us have just stayed silent about. So welcome, Jody.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit. I know your mother was obviously an alcoholic, but tell us a little bit about your journey and how you felt the need to start advocating and really advocating for your past.
Yeah. Well, like I spent most of my adult life until I was 26 very focused on my lifelong quest to convince my mother to finally stop drinking. And her drinking had affected me tremendously growing up. And as her disease progressed into my teenage years and early adult years, yeah, I was just so determined, as the eldest daughter of two, to be the one to make her finally accept help and we could all live happily ever after. That's what I thought. If she stopped drinking, the chaos would stop and my father, my sister, and I could live our own life. Because as is often the case, we really didn't have our own lives. We had sort of one big chaotic life that revolved around my mother's drinking. And, after doing everything I could think to do to help her at 26, I finally hit my own rock bottom. I was exhausted. I was deeply depressed. I dreaded every day. And I thought, I'm not sure I will survive this the way that it feels. I thought somehow, some way it was going to take my life. And so it was this desperation point that I finally went to an Al-Anon meeting. And I went there still desperate for the solution to the drinking. And it was there when I heard those fellow participants sharing their story that I thought, that's my story. That's how I felt. And
Mhm.
it was in that I had this true aha that I was ill. I was very ill, and that it was my time to stop obsessing over my mother's drinking and focus on taking good care of me. And that was 15 years ago. That was the start of my journey. And I'm so thrilled to report that after a lot of focus on me and therapy, self-care, education, that I truly love the life that I have today. And what back at 26 years old at that Al-Anon meeting, walking down the steps into that meeting, I couldn't have imagined it. And so I feel very compelled to share my story to help others learn from what I've learned and to kind of continue that conversation just as you're doing. And it's been very inspiring to hear from so many others who share our story.
Oh, yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, I can imagine because that's why I do what I do. It's funny that you said 26 was your aha moment because that was my aha moment. I had
Oh,
been through
interesting.
all of, yeah, it was very interesting. I was actually getting ready to have my first child. And I don't know if you have children, but if you have you ever read the book Love You Forever?
No, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so for those of you that have listened to other episodes, you've probably heard me mention this, but it's a book about it's a children's book, but it's about a mother's unconditional love for her son. So she's pregnant and she's rocking back and forth in the rocking chair and she's singing "I love you forever, I like you for always, forever and ever, you're my baby, you'll be." And it goes through all these stages where he's terrible twos, being a bratty teenager, doing all this stuff, getting grown, moving out. at the end of the book, the tables are turned and she's now weak and frail and old. And he's rocking her, singing the same
Oh yeah.
song, but singing My Mommy You'll Be. And I was
Wow.
pregnant with my first child, reading that book, and it should have been like this really serendipitous, like happy moment. And I totally broke down because I was like, I don't even have a memory of hugging my mother. Like, I don't
Right.
even know what unconditional love feels like. And that was my aha moment. And I thought, obviously, the answer can't be just doing the exact opposite of what I saw. That can't be just the answer. So that's when that was my aha moment at exactly 26 years old. So, I mean, God bless it that we got it that early, because some
Yes.
people are in their 50s and 60s going, life's just not quite right. And I can't put my finger on it.
Hmm. Well,
Right.
I'm so grateful for that that book inspired you. The books are
Hmm.
very powerful.
Absolutely. So tell us, so the work you do is, I mean, you write, you have a blog, you do all kinds of stuff, but what, okay, so in Al-Anon, I know I went to Al-Anon for many, many years. Did you kind of move out of Al-Anon to go to anything else, or was that your answer? Did you like move to adult children of alcoholics after Al-Anon?
Did. Yeah. When I, so at that point, when I started my journey, it began with Al-Anon, and hearing those stories at the meetings kind of helped set my path. So I was desperate at that point for kind of a playbook. And you probably felt that way at
Mhm.
26 when you were about to have a child. You know, what do I do? I recognize now that I've been so deeply affected. What do I do? Well, I know no playbook existed. So what I thought is I could get more educated. And so I started reading more about the science of addiction and truly understanding what had happened to my family, what my mother, was deeply addicted to alcohol. And up until that point, I did not understand the true science of addiction. I thought there was a lot more decision making that she was making. And so that emphasis on education really opened my eyes to realize that I had a completely normal reaction to everything that had happened. And it was also very bittersweet to discover just how common it is. Up until that point, I felt very alone, and it was such a secret, and no one at school or in my world talked about it. So I felt very alone. And so it was a very bittersweet feeling to think there are so many other people who have experienced this, so I'm not alone. But also there are so many people who've experienced this, and that was very hard to recognize because I knew how painful that it was. So I kept going to the Al-Anon meetings. I did go to adult children of dysfunction a bit too. I spent a lot of time for about 3 or 4 years in both groups. And as you probably have shared with others, sometimes you have to go to a few different meetings to find
Mhm.
one that fits your style. They all have a different vibe or a different focus. And so that was very helpful. And then around that time, I started therapy and found a few who, had ACOA or adult children of alcoholics syndrome and dysfunctional family background, but they didn't really connect with me. I found that they didn't have the true understanding of what I'd gone through. So it took me a few different therapists. I view it kind of like dating, where you
Mm.
have to spend
Mhm.
time with different therapists to really find one who fits you at that moment. And so, after a few years, I found a therapist who really clicked well with me, who had grown up with an alcoholic father and had was an alcoholic in recovery himself. So he got me immediately and kind of set me on the path, asking me questions very directly that helped open my eyes to what I needed to do. And around that time, with the therapy and education, I started truly understanding what self-care was, because I didn't know what it meant to take good care of myself because I'd
Mhm.
never done it before. And I started doing things that as a child I loved to do and kind of being free for the first time. And that's when things really started to change for me and led me to where I am today.
Awesome. So did you, and I don't know if I go anywhere. We didn't talk about this before. Usually I say, is there anywhere you don't want me to go or talk about, or And if I do, just kind of nod or say, stop, good
Okay.
enough.
Yeah.
But let me ask this first. Do you still have
Mhm.
a good relationship with your parents?
Well, it's so fascinating, Tammy. I at one time thought that I could never have a good relationship with my mother. But I would say today it's good. We got into a very healthy spot for one reason alone, and that is boundaries.
Hmm.
Because I had to set very firm boundaries with her. I'd stick to them. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. And for that reason, we've been able to kind of grow this relationship. So we talk about once a week. We spend time as a family at holidays and occasionally, get together. She still is active and she still suffers from her substance use disorder, but she's in a much better spot than I really ever could have imagined. My father passed away about 10 years ago. And I didn't, at that time when he passed away, I didn't think that she would survive it. I feared that she would the grief coupled with everything else she already had going on. But amazingly, when she was forced to stand on her own 2 feet and take care of herself and respect my boundaries, interestingly, she started to get better herself.
That's great. And I love stories where people can actually reconcile and then they can re-establish and mend that relationship because I don't know, again, I don't know I know there was chaos, I know there was dysfunction, I know there was confusion, I don't know if there was fear and of physical abuse, I don't know any of those details, but it's good to know that so many people you can reestablish that. And going to Al-Anon sometimes, that was a big turning point for me. I remember my father told me when I was 13, because he was an alcoholic as well, and he said to me when I was 13 years old, Tammy, your mother and I are doing irreparable damage to you and your brother and sister.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know how to help
Huh.
you. I was like, okay. Like, so what do I do with that? And I went to an Alateen meeting and they were talking about empathy. That was the subject of the night. And the very night before, my mom had, it was kind of just a bad situation. My mom had been drinking, obviously. They were getting ready to get divorced. And back in the 70s, there wasn't custody battles. Mom got basically, unless you could prove her unfit, mom got custody. That's kind of how it was a while ago. So she was kind of nervous about that. So she was doing everything she could to get my father to be abusive to her so that we would have to say, Dad hits mom. And my father was always like the most mellow, like chilled out kind, just relaxed. And I'll never forget it. And that very next morning, I went to this Al Anon meeting or day after school after I'd watched my mother burn cigarettes on my father trying to get him to hit her. And my dad's like, not going to do it. But at that stage in my life, I regret that it was that meeting because I didn't understand empathy. I didn't understand putting yourself in someone's shoes. I didn't understand, like you said, that it was a disease and that it wasn't her just being this nasty, mean person. It was the alcohol doing it to her. So I walked away from Alateen for 15 years, 11 years, something like that. And it took me getting back. And I wish I hadn't gone to that one meeting because now I don't have hard feelings. My parents have both passed, but there is no hard feelings. There's only compassion and there's empathy for anybody that is going through that situation. So,
Mhm.
it takes
Yeah.
work. When
Yep.
relationships are broken like that, it takes a lot of work, but I love that
Mhm.
you're hopeful and you can share that it's mendable. Those relationships are absolutely mendable.
Yes. And when you're living with an active alcoholic, it's very difficult to have empathy because you're just in such a unhealthy, likely destructive environment. You can't think clearly, your basic needs are not being met. It's very hard to separate this horrible person as they are when they're drinking from the human being underneath all of that. And yeah, as a teenager, I got very resentful because I
Mm,
didn't understand what was going on. I thought that every day my mother was making a decision and
mhm,
I was crying, I was begging, I was writing letters, I was calling her siblings and doing everything I could possibly think to do as a young person. And I just simply didn't understand that I could not control it. And it wasn't my job. My job was to be a kid, to be a young
Mhm.
person and take good care of me. But I didn't have any of this education or this knowledge. And like your father, my father was not an alcoholic, but he was a very deeply embedded codependent. And
Mhm.
he felt very strongly that my mother just needed everyone to take care of things for her. Now, as we know, we were completely enabling her.
Right.
And looking back, I thought I was doing the right thing, by keeping everything a secret, cleaning up the messes, figuratively and literally, keeping everything together, not telling anyone, taking care of myself, taking care of my younger sister. I became absolutely the mother in the whole household. So
Mhm.
I was the mother figure, the reliable, dependent one for my sister. And my mother had no reason to change because I had taken over all of her responsibilities.
Mhm.
And I deeply regret that because I took that purpose from her unknowingly. I thought I was doing the right thing, being the good older daughter. And now I know through education that I was really preventing her from realizing the help that she needed to get. Unfortunately, she did not ever really accept the help,
Right.
but I never gave her the chance during those years to do so.
Right. And I also don't like when people say, well, we got to let them hit rock bottom. You can still be compassionate and you can still try to do those things, but yeah, it's heart-wrenching watching
Yes.
someone that you love
Mhm.
hit rock bottom, whether it's a spouse or a child or an aunt and well, whoever it is, to let that you want to help them. You want to, and I know you've probably done blog posts on, is it enabling or is it helping? Like there's a big difference between helping someone and being kind and enabling them to carry on their addiction. I mean, it's definitely a fine line, but it's good. Again, that's why you're out here to tell people. And do you think that she knew, like, did you have any conversations when she was actively drinking about the drinking? Like, was it ever discussed?
Oh, yes. 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 Between the two of us, it started when I was about 12, me having the frank conversations with her about how it made me feel. And, she came from an alcoholic household
Mhm.
when she was 11 years old, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of unresolved trauma. I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea as a child. So she never opened up about any of that. She just always dismissed the drinking as something I didn't need to worry about, that it was just something she had to do. And the conversations really went nowhere. We repeated the same conversation over and over again for several years. Even, as I became a young adult, I was so certain that I could one day say the right thing, or she would reach a point where she was just tired of it, tired of that life, and miraculously decide to get help or just cold turkey stop drinking. I had that, you know, hope too. And my father had this rosy outlook on life. That was his personality, which was a
Oh.
wonderful trait to have, except when it came to my mother, because he would always say, things just have a way of working out. And he just believed that we just got through that period. She was going through a rough patch. We would, turn out okay on the other side. Well, the rough patches went on for years, and he didn't have the education or the knowledge to know what to do. So he just kind of did the best that he could. And unfortunately, he passed away just as I was really getting wisdom on this
Right.
topic.
Hmm.
And I often wonder if he had passed away, how I could have helped him learn and, deal with it. But the good news is my sister and I, we have the wisdom. We're stopping the cycle in our
Yeah.
family, and we've, are focused on ourselves.
Perfect. I mean, that's all you can do. And I go back to all these cliches. I don't know how many times I heard my mother say, I don't know why you guys keep bothering me about this. I'm only hurting myself.
Hmm.
And if she was a child psychiatrist.
Wow.
So I feel like there had to be some knowledge of what was going on. I mean, she was a doctor, like she had to know. But again, she was troubled her whole life. It was a coping mechanism. That's how it started. She was anorexic at 13. Her father sent her to boarding school for 4 years, never even saw her. And he was a psychiatrist. So it was like just boom, boom, boom. So you talk about generational, but yes, it's good that, somebody stand up. That's what I tell my kids. And I even tell my kids, and I'm very honest with them, is that even if I had never picked up a drink, you are acquiring all the traits of having lived with an alcoholic, because I was at the beginning of my learning stage. If I knew now what I knew 20 years ago when my children were born, totally different ballgame. But you can't beat yourself up about that. All you can do is move forward.
Absolutely. Yes. And as we chatted about earlier, this is really a lifelong journey. And,
Mhm.
when I started it, I thought, well, at some point here I will reach full knowledge of this topic. Be happy. I will have everything I need to have. And I know now that it's a journey of continual learning. So,
Mhm.
5 years ago, I thought I really had great wisdom. And now 5 years later, there's so much more that I recognize that I have opportunity to learn and grow. And it's very exciting
Yes.
because I am at a point that I never thought that I could be at. Yeah, I thought that I was dealt very bad cards in life, that I would
Mhm.
always be burdened with being in the middle of the chaos, taking care of my parents on every level, financially, emotionally. Just so much responsibility that I thought I had to bear for the rest of my life. It was
Mm.
overwhelming. You can imagine why I
Yeah.
felt so depressed at 26.
Yeah.
And now being through this whole process of healing, it's so exciting. I wish I could go back in time and kind of whisper in teenager me's ear and say, "This is what life is going to be like in the future. You believe that you'll
Right.
get there, and you will." And there are just millions of people who have lived this, and you listen to the stories. They're all variations of the same story, and you
Absolutely.
think, how did they get through that and come out, so fulfilled and, having a life they love. And it's because they put in the time to heal. So
Yes.
much is possible.
Now, what would you attribute your best, like, I know you went to therapy. Is that what you would say did the most healing for you, was the therapy?
No, actually, it was the Al-Anon meetings. I mean,
Okay.
therapy had to happen. It was absolutely
Yep.
critical step, but it was the realization that I had a completely normal reaction because all the while the anxiety that I felt, issues that I had picked up along the way with my relationships, how I worked, everything was attributed to my experiences with my mother. And being in those meetings really kind of opened my eyes that other people are feeling this way too. You're normal. And now you just have to figure out how to sort of unprogram your thinking. And
Hmm.
I did a lot of that. It's still there. It still
Yeah.
comes back, of course. But that's why the learning is always good, and staying connected with people and having the conversations always a reminder of the healthy thinking. And when you start to
Absolutely.
slip back into the unhealthy thinking, it's the voices and the stories around you that remind and get you right back on the right path.
Right. And I love that you made the comment that you said you had to go back and, like, you wanted to go back and talk to that teenager and whisper in their ear and say, this is what it can be like, and this is what it's going to look like. But you also made a reference to comment earlier that you had clearly done some inner child work. Like you were going back and being that young child again. And I think that is so vitally important for people listening, that is, you learn to be a kid again, parent yourself like that little child that didn't get that love. I mean, I still do it to this day when I'm like sad about something. I literally physically hug myself, like, you got this, girl. You're okay. You're safe. I mean, it's just all those, that it's the child that runs your life. That inner child is like your subconscious mind.
Yes.
And that is what is running it's not necessarily what's running your life, but it's what makes those split decisions. It's what makes you feel good or bad about yourself. It's what makes all of that stuff. So if you can go, the more you can go back and get in touch with that little Jody, the better you're going to be.
You
I
are absolutely correct
Yeah.
in that. And the most impactful therapist I had, he was the one I mentioned earlier about who was an alcoholic in recovery himself. He had an alcoholic father. He challenged me to do a lot of that inner child work. And I sort of laughed at him. It all seemed very corny to me. And I thought, I don't need that. You know, I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need to go back that far. And he said, just do me a favor and take a photo of yourself, maybe 6 or 7 years old, and
Hmm.
post it somewhere in your house, like on your refrigerator or your bathroom mirror or whatever. And I did it. And it absolutely shifted my view
Hmm.
because I suddenly saw this innocent little kid, not
Yeah.
as me as a 7-year-old, but this innocent kid. And I felt sad for her. I felt angry. Like this young person was robbed and had to grow up way too fast. And in my next session after that, or I had that photo of myself taped up, he said, you know, how do you feel? And I angry. And it was the very first time that I had ever felt that emotion, anger about everything. It had been sadness that my mother had had this issue, sadness that I experienced it, sadness that I failed to solve it like I wanted to my whole life. And I finally felt anger. And that emotion is what fueled me to start doing a lot more activities that I love to do. It really helped define my self-care path. And I started doing things I love to do, which opened up the door for new friend groups with people who had similar interests.
Hmm.
And it really gave me a more fulfilled, joyful life. And it was all from that inner child work that started with the photo of myself on my bathroom mirror.
You got it. I've done about, I would say probably on and off like 6 years. I mean, inner child work has just become a part of who I am, really. I talk to that inner child. I acknowledge when something's going on and I think, oh, that doesn't sound like me. Where'd that come from? I go right back there. Let's go right back there. Let's write her a letter. I do a lot of journaling. And when I write her letters, I always use the opposite hand and have her write one back. I don't know if you've ever tried
Oh,
anything like that.
no.
And the reasoning for that, the things that I've heard from psychologists and stuff is that when you use your opposite hand, you're pulling from the other side of your brain, you're kind of opening up more of the intuition side, all of this stuff. I think there's something different now. This is just me thinking. So who knows? You can take this with a grain of salt. But when you're writing with your opposite hand, you're focusing on the letters, not what you're actually saying. You're focusing on the purposely, like what you want to say. But I feel like when I do that, it takes the ego out of it for me. It takes me out of it. And I'm just writing from her and focusing on the T and the H. And then I'll look down and like afterwards and I'll read it like 2 days later and be like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. Like I never, like literally, it's almost like
Mhm.
I don't want to say dissociating, but almost like I am. I'm literally like
Oh, yeah, I love that
focusing on
method.
that.
I'm gonna try that for sure. That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
It made a really big difference to me. It really did. So,
Oh,
well, this
great.
has been so much fun. I don't want to keep you all day. I know you are super busy, but um I could talk to you all day. I mean, obviously I
Likewise. Yeah.
was gonna say it's like being in a meeting now. I'm just
Yep.
kidding. But yeah, those there is so much power in community. And I tell people that all the time. And you have questions. Like that's why I do this podcast. If one person out of 10,000 goes, huh, maybe I'll try that, or that sounds cool, or I never thought about that. I went back and I was kind of like you. I like to learn. I'm a chronic learner. So I had somebody say to me, hey, you ought to do NLP. Like that might help you with your childhood stuff. So what do? I immediately go out and get certified to do NLP. I'm not going to let anybody try anything on me until I know what it's all about. But there's always learning. Like you said, there's always something. And
Mhm.
always, there's so much out there, guys. We are in a perfect world where there's so many resources for everybody. It shouldn't, all you need is one idea to spark, wow, there's more. I can learn more,
Yes.
or I can be a little bit happier. And
Mhm.
when you
Yeah,
start
and
at a
even if you don't have
zero,
the
yeah,
exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't have the time, even, I started with 1 hour every week with one Al-Anon meeting. And, then I suddenly found the time miraculously. I had, a very demanding job. I was obviously very responsible at home for my sister, lots of other things going on. But I started finding the time to put into it, and it all just became clear what I needed to do. And I was forever grateful that I put those little bits of time into it because it's so more than worth it.
Oh yeah. And now that we have the internet, like you said, you could jump on right now and find 20 online Al-Anon meetings.
Yes. Yes. How
They're
fortunate we
everywhere.
are in that way. Yes.
Sometimes I'll wake up sometimes in the middle of the night. It'll be 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, there's got to be one going on in Germany because it's 10 in the morning
Right.
there. You just
Yeah.
jump on. Like it's so easy. But if people want to work with you or talk to you or get more of your information, what is the absolute best place and quickest place for them to access you?
The best place is my website, jodylamb.com. I there share tips and resources, a lot about my personal journey, what I learned along the way. I'm also on, pretty much all the social platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And right now I'm working on a memoir, so I'm really excited to release that in 2025. So if you're interested in learning more details about my story and what I learned, there's a sign up to my email list right on the homepage of my website, jodylamb.com. And if you sign up, you'll get tips and resources and be alerted when that book is available. I'm excited to share more details about my story. People have asked me a lot of questions about it, and I think it's very familiar to people. So, really excited about next year for that.
Oh, that'll be great. And we'll just make sure you email me and I'll change the links in there so they can get a link to that book. But she is being very modest, guys. If you're out there listening, she has been a wealth of information for me for absolutely years. If I have any question about anything, I literally just go to Pinterest and Google it in, or go to Pinterest and just type in the search, like, codependency, bam. And who comes up? Jody Lamb. And I read the article and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Cool. Thanks. It's like literally I can get my daily dose just from you on social media, but you have a lot of good information. So
Thank you very
definitely,
much.
yes, you're welcome. Definitely check out her website for sure. Now, if you had to leave the listeners, and I know you've given a lot of golden nuggets and tips, but if you had to leave them with something tangible or some words of wisdom or just something to take with them today, what would it be?
When I find myself faced with a decision every day, whether it's with a boundary with my mother, with work, with people in my life, I ask myself a simple question, and that is this good for you? And at first, it felt very selfish to think like this because, my whole life, I never put myself first.
Hmm.
But it is so helpful in making decisions because most often, it's not good for me. And it really helps guide in making the right decision, in setting firm boundaries. And I've often found that what feels wrong in the moment is generally absolutely the right thing to do. And it's uncomfortable, but it's worth following your intuition and making that decision because it can be what makes or breaks your life, and your life depends on it. So asking yourself that question can really be a guide.
Wow. That's a good one. I haven't gotten that one. 107 episodes. I haven't gotten that one. But that is a perfect test, is just ask yourself this. It's very simple. It's cut and dry. Is this good for you? If it's not, don't do it. Don't entertain it. Don't let it in. Save your energy around your space. Like, you deserve 100% of that energy that is yours, that you love. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jody.
Well, thank you, Tammy. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And maybe we'll have you back when your book launches, when your memoir launches. That would be
Oh,
fun.
that'd be great.
That would be
Yeah,
super
thank
fun.
you.
And for everybody out there listening, you heard it. It doesn't matter, guys, what you went through. There is hope, there is healing, there is a happier you at the other side. You just got to learn where to look for it. Have a blessed day. Bye, guys.